All right, welcome back. And as we said, we are live here at the Port of Long Beach, California. And as we mentioned at the top of the hour, the president announcing a breakthrough trade deal with the United Kingdom. This was the deal that was teased last week. If you remember, I sat down exclusively with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick in Phoenix and asked how close we were to seeing any trade deals. And he said this.
I have a deal. Done. But I need to wait for their prime minister and their parliament to give its approval, which I expect shortly. Well, I'm not going to tell you what country. I'll let the president.
It's just you and me here and a couple of million people hopefully
I'll
watching.
let the president decide.
Well, he wouldn't tell us then, but now we know that this was the deal, the one just now with the UK that Commerce Secretary Lutnick was referring to. But the UK, while important, is not China. China, still the biggest trade fish in the pond, and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is heading to Switzerland this week to negotiate some portions or a deal with China. Now, China accounts for about $582 billion in total trade, $439 billion of which is incoming goods into ports like this in Long Beach and LA next door. That's all the stuff that we buy and import from China. Let's get more details on this trade arrangement with the UK and what may to come. That is the United States Trade Representative, Ambassador Jamieson Greer. Ambassador Greer, thank you very much for joining us. How important is this deal with the UK? And more importantly, does it provide the framework for deals with other nations like a China?
So, Brian, great to be with you. And I can't really overstate the importance of this deal. The United Kingdom is the 6th largest economy in the world. They have an economy that's similar to ours in terms of development and rule of law and governance, et cetera. And so this is exactly the type of deal that we should be making. The UK did a pretty bold thing a few years ago when they did Brexit, and part of the reason they did it is so they could have more control over their trade policy separate from Europe. And we're seeing that today. They've agreed to open up their market to our agricultural products, to our industrial goods, and importantly to align with us on economic security. To your question, what does this mean for other countries? Is this a framework? This certainly is the framework. I've been talking to dozens of countries, and I tell them this. I walk through different buckets where we need to talk about tariffs, non-tariff barriers, economic security, et cetera. And this is the right framework, and other countries should look to this as a model.
Mm-hmm. Every time we get a positive comment, or in this case, an actual deal on trade, the stock market goes up. We're CNBC, Mr. Ambassador, I don't need to tell you that. The president making comments about buying the stock market today. Should we take those comments and this deal as a sign of optimism about what may be to come? Because the markets, the stock markets, which are kind of our metric, as you know, they are responding in a positive way.
Well, I think anytime you get positive news, you'll get a reaction in the stock market. Sometimes the market, will underreact or overreact. What's important to look at are the trends, and the trends we're looking at are, the market's in a great place, the jobs numbers were good. We're going to have more deals in the weeks and months to come. We're talking to China this weekend, the Secretary of the Treasury and I think everybody should take comfort and be excited about what's coming. The president has shown that he knows how to use trade policy in connection with other economic tools to have a very competitive economy, and that's what we're seeing right now. And the market is just one aspect of that.
Well, one thing that the president of the Port of Long Beach, Mario Cordero, I don't know if you're able to hear that comment, Mr. Ambassador, but we were talking also off camera about critical dates ahead, and Mario Cordero said that July 2nd was the next most critical date that he and his team here are watching, because that is the day the 90-day pause on reciprocal tariffs ends. And if we go past that date and the reciprocal tariffs are enforced, then we start to see hits on countries like Vietnam and others, and they're really worried here about what happens if that happens. Are you confident that we can get some kind of deals done where that July 2nd date just kind of goes away?
Well, I would say, first of all, I think my calculation is July 8th, so you're shorting me a week, I think. The 90 days was, I think, from April 8th or 9th. So I would say that with some countries, we will have additional deals. All these countries you just talked about, Vietnam, other Southeast Asian countries, they're talking to us, and they're being very forward-leaning. obviously we have concerns about some of these countries. That's where we have some of our largest trade deficits, and that's actually the purpose of these tariffs, is to get that trade deficit down. But we're having fruitful talks with Vietnam and others, and they understand what we're trying to solve for. So on some of these, the president will have an agreement. Others of these, he may not, but we're doing our best to find a way forward to make trade more reciprocal and fair and balanced.
Ambassador Greer, it's Kelly here.
Well, on TV.
Oh, sorry, Brian, I was just going to quickly
go ahead,
ask,
Kelly.
I so appreciate you being here, because everyone's, on pins and needles about these talks in Switzerland this weekend, where you'll be with Treasury Secretary Bessent. The president, of course, kind of walked that back a little bit, saying, I think it was yesterday, that he doesn't want to lower the tariff rate as a way to jumpstart negotiations. So what is on the table and what's not going into these discussions?
Certainly, and well, today, earlier in the Oval Office, he had a very specific question where one of the press said, during these negotiations, during these talks, if the Chinese move, then are you willing to move tariffs? And he said, I might be flexible. So that's that's certainly on the table. We've talked about this. The Chinese we have as a de-escalatory option. We think this is an opportunity to find some stability with these folks. China's market and economy is so different from our own. It's so hard to fit a square into a circle in a way that's fair. So that's a much longer conversation. This talk is about can we get to a stable place, and maybe that's a foundation for something more.
Yeah, you can't see it, I don't think, Mr. Ambassador, but the ship over our shoulder, the OOCL Utah, that actually came from Shenzhen, China, and it wasn't full. I mean, it has a lot of containers, what they call boxes, on it, but it was not full. That's goods. Now, here's the dirty secret. Goods, while critical, are only about 15% of the entire American economy. About 70+% is services, not physical things, but services we provide. Is there any risk of potential tariffs on services, which are a far larger part of the economy than goods?
Are you talking about foreign countries imposing tariffs on or fees or something on our services?
No, us imposing tariffs on services of other countries into the United States.
Understood. Well, listen, my lodestar on all of this is the trade fair and balanced. And if we have a situation where foreign service providers benefit from subsidies or some other discriminatory practices where they're allowed to operate here, but they don't let our services operate there. Our digital tech companies are a great example, where the European Union is constantly doing shakedowns, right, in terms of fines and penalties. That kind of thing I'm concerned about. And my view is we should take an enforcement action with the view to resolving these issues, right? And if countries don't want to resolve the issues, then we can talk about next steps. Yeah. But I mean, I think services, we have to worry about that.
Do you feel like China, and I don't know who is going to be, I know that we've got Treasury Secretary Bessent and his team going to Switzerland. I don't know the players on the Chinese side. You probably do. Do you feel like they will be fair actors in this? I mean, we talk about this from the U.S. side. Do you feel like the Chinese are going to come in also wanting to make a deal? Because, as you know better than anybody, if you don't want to get a deal done, if you don't want to play fair and actually negotiate, it's probably not going to happen.
So that's right. So the Secretary and I are going over. We're going to meet with Hu Feng and then some other Chinese folks in the delegation. These are people, like I've spoken with Vice Premier Hu Feng before Liberation Day. Some of the folks who work for him, I know from the first go-around when we were dealing with China in Trump 1. And so these folks are serious, right? They're sending real people to talk to us about real issues. So I'm confident that we can have a straightforward and candid discussion with these folks, and it's not just, we're not doing this meeting with each other just for formalities, right? We're going to talk.
Well, that's it. You're not going to go to Switzerland, not you, but Secretary Bessent. Maybe you'll go. Who knows? And
no, I am
sit down
going.
in that room and hopefully
going. Yes.
Well, you are going. Well, you better get over there. It's Thursday afternoon, and the meeting's on Saturday, I think.
I'm leaving tonight. No, I'm going tonight. Scott and I are going, and we are going to with a sense of seriousness of the situation.
Well, good it is, and I'll tell you what, just being here at this port, a lot of the women and men that work here, they're hoping for a deal because this is also their livelihood. Ambassador Jamieson Greer, U.S. Trade Representative, have a successful trip. Keep us informed. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Really good to hear from him on the eve of this major trip to Switzerland, and you can see consumer-related stocks have really taken a beating since all of this tariff fight broke out. A lot of these names are well off their 52-week highs. Just today, Shopify reported weak growth from merchants. Krispy Kreme sinking to a record low, scrapping its dividend to save cash. Restaurant Brands reporting a sales drop for brands like Burger King, and Crocs withdrawing their full-year guidance due to consumer weakness and the trade war. But that stock is actually up nearly 11% today, and we will speak to the CEO about tariffs, the consumer, and more right after this.